The room fell silent as the screen refreshed. Project credit, lead, Mason Carter, strategic advisor, Daniel Carter. Ethan Carter froze. The report on Operation Sentinel Shield, the very mission that had nearly cost him his career, now bore the names of his brothers. Not a single mention of him. Not a single word about the man who'd spent 20 sleepless nights at the Pentagon, tracing the malware's origin and designing the countermeasures that saved billions in the financial sector, including their family's firm. His hands clenched around the ceramic mug, the coffee now cold. A thin crack formed along the rim, like the fault line inside his chest. "They used my after-action notes," Jessica Lynn whispered, eyes wide as she hovered beside his desk. "Everything's in that final brief, even your raw simulations. They just scrubbed your name." Ethan stood slowly, the hum of the fluorescent lights now deafening. His mouth was dry. "Did anyone sign off on this?" Jessica bit her lip. "Colonel Hart. I overheard him, said it was better this way, for political optics. That no one needs to know it was a military operation that cleaned up after civilian negligence." The words sank deep. Strategic optics, family pride, public image. His entire life Ethan had been edited out of their story. He logged out without a word. As he stepped outside, the early winter chill of DC slapped his face. Somewhere behind him, the Department of Defense building loomed in sterile silence, and in his pocket, almost mocking, was the thick ivory envelope that had arrived 2 days earlier. "Gerald Carter requests the honor of your presence at his retirement gala, Peninsula Hotel, Chicago. Black tie. Kindly RSVP by Friday. Not Major General Ethan Carter." Just Mr. Like nothing had changed since the night his father tore up his West Point acceptance letter. That night, at their modest Virginia apartment, Ethan placed the envelope in front of his wife, Emily. She was feeding their son, James, who kept tugging on her hair. "He still pretends I don't exist," Ethan muttered. Emily looked at the envelope, then at him. "He doesn't know how to exist in your world." "He never wanted me in his world either," she sighed. "Maybe that's why you need to go. Not to prove anything, but to end it." He stared at her. "You really think showing up will end anything?" Emily shrugged. "Closure's not about them. It's about what you're done carrying." The next morning, Ethan packed a navy blue suit, not the uniform, never the uniform, and pinned a tiny West Point insignia inside his lapel. A quiet act of defiance. As the flight touched down over the frozen streets of Chicago, Ethan's mind flickered with memories. His mother's last hug. Mason's jeering laugh when Ethan left home. His father's voice, "A soldier's only legacy is a folded flag." He didn't go home. Just took a taxi straight to the Peninsula Hotel. Inside the gold-lit ballroom, a $1,000 chandelier cast a soft glow over marble floors and silk-clad guests. The Carter name was everywhere, etched in the ice sculpture, embossed on the wine glasses. He grabbed a glass of water, stood by the far wall, and hoped to pass unnoticed. Too late. "Look what the cat dragged in," Mason drawled, walking up with a crystal flute in hand. "Didn't think base pay could cover these kinds of venues?" Ethan said nothing. Daniel followed with a smug grin. "Still sleeping on cots, General?" They chuckled. He turned to leave, but the mic crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen," Gerald Carter's voice rang out, "tonight is about legacy, about the sons who built this empire beside me." His gaze swept the room and landed on Ethan like a scalpel. "And then, there's Ethan," Gerald said, lips curling into that familiar condescension. "A man who chose mud over money. Maybe it's best if he left before he lowers the tone." Laughter rippled across the room like poison in champagne. Ethan didn't move. Not yet. A voice boomed from the back. "You're Major General Ethan Carter, aren't you?" The crowd turned. A tall man stepped forward, Roger Bennett, chairman of Carter Equity. Ethan nodded slowly. Roger's eyes burned through the silence. "You're the one who saved this company." The room went dead still. Gerald paled. Ethan raised his glass, voice calm. "I just came to say congratulations, but if you'd like to continue rewriting history, I brought the original script. If you've ever been overlooked after giving your all, type 1. The video looped again on the massive LED screen behind the ballroom stage. Stock clips of Carter Equity's greatest triumphs flashed by. Market graphs, investor meetings, Mason and Daniel shaking hands with world leaders. Then came the final slide. Cyber Defense Partner, special thanks. Mason Carter, Daniel Carter, and the Advanced Response Division. Ethan Carter blinked, stunned. His face, his entire existence, was gone from the story again. Just 2 years ago, he had stood in a sealed command center at the Pentagon, 3 days without sleep, stopping the malware that would have wiped Carter Equity's financial records from existence. And now here he stood, erased from the narrative, surrounded by applause for the men who'd never touched a line of code. He felt his jaw tighten. The only thing keeping him upright was the tiny West Point pin on his lapel. A waiter passed by with champagne. Ethan reached for water instead. He needed clarity, not comfort. From the stage, Gerald Carter smiled as if nothing had happened. "Tonight," he said into the mic, "we honor not just a company, but a legacy, built by vision, cemented by family, and carried forward by my 2 sons, Mason and Daniel, the real architects of Carter Equity's future." The crowd clapped obediently. Mason raised his glass with a smug tilt. Daniel flashed his well-rehearsed political grin. And as for Ethan, Gerald paused. Well, some paths lead nowhere. There it was, the final blow. Ethan's pulse thundered. His grip around the glass tightened so hard it might crack. Every cell in his body screamed, "Leave!" But then, a slow, deliberate clap echoed from the back of the ballroom. It was Roger Bennett. The chairman's crisp navy suit stood in stark contrast to the glittering gold of the Carter clan. He stepped forward, voice steady and sharp. "Forgive me," he said, interrupting, "but there's someone in this room who hasn't been recognized, someone whose work saved all of this from falling apart." Whispers stirred. Mason's face dropped. Daniel froze mid-sip. Roger turned to Ethan. "Major General Ethan Carter, would you join me?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded once and walked slowly toward the stage. Every eye in the room followed, some wide in surprise, others trying not to show their shame. Roger motioned for the mic. For those who don't know, Ethan led the operation that detected and dismantled the Sentinel malware before it detonated across our financial system. It wasn't Mason or Daniel. It was him. Silence fell like a bomb. Ethan looked toward his father. Gerald's eyes darted like he was searching for a script. His mouth opened, but no words came. "I didn't know," Gerald finally said, barely audible. Ethan took the mic from Roger. His voice, at first low, grew stronger. "You didn't ask." He let that linger, then turned to the crowd. "I'm not here for applause. I came to say congratulations. But I've learned something these past 2 decades. Silence is a weapon, and sometimes absence isn't forgetfulness, it's choice." He looked at Mason and Daniel. "Your names are on the plaque, but my team bled for that firewall. We protected more than your profits. We protected the country." Daniel stepped forward, flustered. "Ethan, this isn't the place." "No," Ethan interrupted. "This is exactly the place." Roger smiled faintly. "Major General Carter, would you mind stepping up fully? I think the stage belongs to you now." Ethan hesitated, then climbed the steps. Applause began, slow, scattered, then swelling. And as he reached center stage, Gerald backed away. Not in anger, but in something closer to disbelief. After the speech, Jessica Lynn texted Ethan one sentence. "They're already trying to redact your name from the post-mission report. Want me to leak the logs?" Ethan replied, "Not yet. Let them wonder how many originals I still have. If you've ever had to fight for recognition you earned, type 2. The email hit his inbox at 4:12 a.m. Subject, Internal Review, Carter Equity Cyber Ops Collaboration Body. Per updated legal review, Major General Ethan Carter's role in Sentinel Ops will be listed as external advisor. Final brief has been locked. No edits permitted. Ethan stared at the message, his pulse steady, not from calm, but from the kind of cold clarity he had learned in combat. They were rewriting him again, erasing not just his name, but his impact. After 2 decades of service, after protecting the very infrastructure they now profited from, but this time, it didn't sting like before, because in a few hours, he would walk on stage at the Pentagon to receive the Distinguished Service Medal for developing the nation's first real-time defense network against systemic cyber terrorism. And this time, he had witnesses. The Pentagon's grand auditorium shimmered in red, white, and blue. Military brass glinted in rows. The air smelled of polished wood and quiet tension. Ethan adjusted his uniform one last time. The silver of his Major General insignia caught the morning light. Emily sat in the front row, holding their son, James, now 5, wide-eyed in a tiny suit. Aunt Helen beamed beside her, and next to them, impossibly, was Mason. No longer in a suit, but a linen shirt from his culinary internship in Paris. A chef's knife pin on his collar. His eyes, nervous, proud, soft. But Ethan's gaze flicked past them all. 3rd row, far left, Gerald Carter, his father, alone, hands folded, dressed in his signature navy. But something in his shoulders had changed. The unshakable confidence was gone. What remained was something quieter, maybe shame, maybe hope. The announcer's voice rang out. Major General Ethan Carter, in recognition of his cybersecurity leadership, bravery in active service, and innovations that now protect over 70% of U.S. civilian infrastructure. The applause swelled. Ethan stepped forward. As the 3-star general pinned the medal to his chest, he felt its weight settle across a lifetime of silence, rejection, and grit. Then came the microphone. He hesitated only a second, then stepped toward it. I was once told, he began, voice calm but resonant, that a soldier's only legacy is a folded flag. A ripple moved through the room. But legacy isn't about medals or applause. It's about staying when others walk out. It's about holding the line when no one claps for you. He looked to Emily, to James, to Mason. I didn't get here because of my family name. In fact, I got here because I stopped chasing it. I chose this path because I believed in protecting something bigger than myself. A pause. Recognition is powerful. But freedom? That's stronger. And the day I stopped begging to be seen was the day I became unstoppable. The applause this time was thunderous. As Ethan stepped down, Gerald Carter rose from his seat, slowly, hesitantly. He walked to his son. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Gerald's voice cracked, raw, unfamiliar. I read your memoir, Ethan blinked. You? His father nodded. All of it. Even the parts that made me look like a bastard. Especially those parts. Ethan stayed quiet. I was wrong, Gerald continued. You weren't the failure. I was too blind to see the son I had. It wasn't a full apology, but it was the closest his father had ever come to one. Then Gerald added, barely audible, I don't deserve a place in your story. Ethan looked him in the eyes. You're in it, Dad, but I choose the ending now. His father nodded, then reached out, a shaky salute. Ethan returned it. A silent understanding passed between them. Not absolution, but a fragile beginning. Hours later, back at base, Ethan's secure line buzzed. Jessica Lynn again. Legal team at Carter Equity just sealed your name out of their public archive. Final audit scrubbed clean. Ethan replied with one line. Then they'd better pray I never open the backups. If you've ever found peace after walking away from the people who never saw you, type 3.